Well, there we go. This has gone flawless. I got a beautiful setup, nice lighting, and I'm early. See, the problem is every other time that I do these live streams, if I try to start at 8 o'clock, it never happens. Welcome. I'm not usually 2 minutes early, but it's like, I guess, good luck that I actually got this thing to run right. This is my 8th live stream, and this is the second week in a row that it's actually gone off early, which I guess I'll freestyle a little. So it's still, did anyone out there on Cape Cod have any snow today? We had a little. Boston up there, past Boston, 6 inches of snow, maybe. So as far as what I'm drinking, this is kombucha tea. It's an acquired taste. I have a friend of mine, a trainer friend, Kaylin Orr. I interviewed her in episodes 6 and 7 of the podcast, and she swears by it. So it's one of those I'll actually listen to her. So this is the live stream that goes along with my podcasts, the In My Footsteps podcast. I always start the live streams the same way, where I assume anyone that's seeing this either live on Instagram, later on IGTV or YouTube or wherever, I'm always going to assume that you've never heard my podcast, never seen a live stream, never seen any of the videos I share on YouTube, because I never want to assume that everyone just knows and I just jump into, well, here's my usual stuff. Because then if you've never been a part of one of these, you're going to feel left out, and I don't want that. This is meant to be more inclusive, more interactive. The podcast that I do is very much one way. You put the headphones in or put it on wherever you get it, and you listen to me talk to you. This is meant to be more interactive, where, yeah, I'll do a lot of talking and going more in depth with some of the podcast topics that I've done. But I also like to hear back from people, what they think of it, ideas maybe for future topics. So essentially, the In My Footsteps podcast is kind of an all-encompassing, I call it like a walk inside my head, I guess. So, in a nutshell, I live on Cape Cod. I'm a New Englander, 12th generation Cape Codder. I love history, so I started with that. The podcast is New England travel and history, a lot of lifestyle topics, which are fun and entertaining and hopefully somewhat insightful. And being a child of the 1980s, it's a large helping of 80s nostalgia. I try to wrap that all up in about 50 to 55 minutes, because I want my podcast to be something that it's, you listen to it and that's it. You don't have to pause it because it's so long and it's like, oh, I got to go do something else. I'll listen to it later, and then you never do. I want it to be like a one sitting. You get to the dinner table and boom, you consume the podcast and it's done. So this week was episode 16, which is, this is the logo. Of course, my image is over the number. It was Sweet 16. So I made it look festive. And so that's what it is. And of course, my stupid face is over it. Well, it's purple and it's got sweet written in gold, if you're missing it. So this week's podcast, I started by talking about an old Cape Cod speakeasy called the Casa Madrid. If anyone grew up on Cape Cod, you may have heard of it. If not, so it's a throwback to Prohibition. I don't want to go too deep into it because I want people to actually go and listen to the podcast too. If I give away everything that's on it, then you'll have no reason to go listen. But in a nutshell, Casa Madrid was opened as a dinner and dancing establishment during Prohibition days. There was a big hoopla about it in the newspapers. And within 6 weeks of its grand opening, it had already been raided for gambling and selling illegal alcohol within 6 weeks. So you pretty much knew what they were from the start. Let me move that out of the way. Anyone that lives on Cape Cod, you can still go see the Casa Madrid building. So it's on Run Pond Road in South Yarmouth, down near, if you know the Yarmouth beaches, Smuggler's Beach, which is named because they smuggled alcohol there, it's right near there. And it's a Spanish stucco type building. So if you've ever been to Cape Cod or New England in general, the homes all have kind of a classic look. The shingles, they don't look like old fishing shacks, but better versions of those. This building is an old stucco building in the middle of a residential neighborhood. You can't miss it. That's a fun story because I used to go by there and see it. I don't have a photo of it on my phone. I try to have some visual aids so it's not just me staring at you, but I don't have one for that. I also found it interesting that for my retro segment, I just call it Back in the Day because that's from my generation. I always planned to do a segment in this episode on something called the Digital Music Express. Anyone who, I don't want to say child of the 80s, but if you're my age, early 40s, little younger, little older, Digital Music Express was kind of the forerunner to satellite radio, where you got this box at home. It kind of went through your cable system and you got a huge remote, and it had, I think, 30 stations, all different ones, commercial free. And my family had that in 93, and I actually got it to work. We couldn't figure out how to get it to work because we were real tech savvy, I guess. But I got it to work, and I wanted to share what the Digital Music Express was. Now, the irony of doing this week was that I always called it, everyone called it, is DMX. DMX is the Digital Music Express. And the week that I'm doing a topic on DMX, the music service, DMX the rapper dies. So I had to go through all of my notes and descriptions for the podcast and change it where I never wrote it as DMX because I didn't want to put, you search for the podcast and you say, oh, he's talking about DMX, and it's like some 90s music service. What the hell? It would look like clickbait because it times with his death. And I swear that was not the idea. Steve, welcome. I'm not putting you on the screen this time. My buddy Steve is in the chat, and when I did my first ever live stream, #1, I didn't know how to do this at all because I'm just whatever. And I clicked a button on there and I put him on the screen so he was half the screen and I was the other half. And I was too afraid to mess with it because I thought I would just end the live stream. So I left him on there. And so it's me talking up here and it's Steve just watching from below. And I'm like, oh, man, I just look so Bush League. No, don't leave. No, wait, I'll put you on the screen. I'll find a photo. I have photos of you on my picture roll. Now we're going to get it. Now you're getting it. It's like embarrass you. I'm looking through photos. You can't see the photos on your end. It looks like I'm just staring at nothing. I swear there's a photo of you fishing. Ha ha! There he is. Now you're on the screen anyway. Oh, beautiful. That's a good picture. That's Papanesset Bay. For anyone that lives on the Cape, it's, oh goodness, it's down in Mashpee. There's the Papanesset Spit, and the spit goes out, and you kind of take the boats, go around the spit and come back in, and they go through this area here into the cove. So that's where we are there. Don't worry, I won't leave this up the whole time. I at least know how to get that down. Yay, there you go. You're gone. Get out. But so the DMX thing was just a pure timing thing. But Digital Music Express was a real thing, a kind of precursor to satellite radio. I talked a lot last week about my journey of why I stopped drinking. I quit drinking back in September. I find that a lot of people, maybe I'm not unique in this, but a lot of people drank, or at least increased their drinking at the beginning of COVID, and then almost like went through it and like, oh, I'm sick of it, and quit drinking later on in it. I found that a lot of liquor stores are now carrying CBD to almost offset the loss of the alcohol they're not selling as much. I don't know, maybe it's just me. But I speak about that a lot more in episode 16 of the podcast, and I spoke on it last week, so I don't want it to be like diving back into that. Basically, I had had enough of just how it made me feel. I have an addictive personality, and that's not meant to be a compliment on me. It's basically, the idea is, so for those that know me, they know I used to live in Las Vegas. I moved out there in 2000, and it was supposed to be the big move, and it was going to be the best thing ever, and I was 22 out there, and I learned that I have a gambling problem. So this was an episode, I think it's 8 of the podcast. Don't quote me on that. I don't have any notes, so this is like up here, and dementia runs in my family. But essentially, I realized that I had an addictive personality because I gambled away. So I was up a lot of money at a table. Stacks of chips, thousands of dollars. I don't know how many thousands, but whatever. And rather than reading the tea leaves as I started to lose my chips, I said, no, this table's hot. I got to keep going. So I would run to the ATM machine, take some money out. Bam, I need more chips. And it was just loss after loss after loss. And I would keep going to the ATM. And in 2000, I don't know if the ATM technology was as good as it is now, because they just let me keep withdrawing money I didn't have. And the next morning, I was a member of Washington Mutual, was my bank out in Vegas. I wanted $5 to go get breakfast, and it said insufficient funds. I said, oh man, that's weird. So I clicked to check balance, and it was negative $400. I said, oh my God. And it's because I have the addictive personality. I used to blow my paycheck on Fridays. I would get it, cash it, and go and blow it on slots, but not at the casino. I'd be at like a freaking 7-Eleven or Albertsons, like in a supermarket. I'd go in there and lose all my money at a slot machine. So that's why I don't live in Vegas anymore. But it's the same with alcohol. I can't go out to a bar and have a couple beers and have it be that. I envy those people who can. I've just learned as I got into my 40s, it's not feasible for me anymore. I'll be O'Doul's drinking now if I ever go to a bar. Hi, Emma. So right now in the chat, I got Steve, I got my sister Ashley, and I got my niece Emma. And I got my kombucha tea. This stuff tastes terrible. I like kombucha tea, but this is some new kind. It tastes like liquid popcorn, which I guess that's not terrible, but it's not what I was expecting. And I'm not getting a sponsorship from them. And also this week, I do This Week in History every week. Now we got Landon. So with the podcast being history, travel, lifestyle, nostalgia, essentially, I know I don't want to say not a lot of people like history, but not everyone is as big a fan as I am. So when I do This Week in History segment, I try to make it as interesting as I can for everyone. I always assume you don't like history. So like this week's one I was really excited about because this was the week that the Titanic sank and Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Those aren't positive stories, but they're big stories. And going up tomorrow morning will be a video going along with This Week in History. I do these video segments for the podcast every week so that it's like expanding the chance that people will see it is basically what it is. And so This Week in History I do. And I got a lot of cool pictures. I've got an animation of the Titanic sinking, which I was so excited about. I guess that's kind of morbid. Yeah, this is fermented. It's just, I don't know. When I bought it at Shaw's, the girl at the register was just fascinated by this. I've never seen green kombucha. I'm like, well, I'll tell you how it is. It's terrible. But I paid for it, so it's like I have to drink it. I can't just dump it out. So next week is episode 17. There's no Sweet 17 logo. I have a logo for it, though. Sweet 17. There it is. So that's next week. And my retro segment is Sleepover Nightmare Stories. I've talked a lot about those on previous podcasts. So there's 4 stories. They kind of go ascending from least embarrassing to most. They don't really embarrass me, so I've embarrassed others. But I don't want to rehash those and ruin it, because those will be going up next week. I also do road trips for travel, which basically is just me telling you things about certain cities, towns in New England. So next week it's Nantucket, and there's going to be 3 Nantucket ones because there's too much to see. So this is downtown Nantucket that I talk about. And I don't know if anyone out there frequents Nantucket, has been to Nantucket, but so I was lucky enough that I did a book. Oh man, I got visual aids. I did a book on Nantucket. I did one on Nantucket and one on Martha's Vineyard. I've got an old friend. His name is Bill D'Souza Mock. He is one of the big wigs as far as New England travel and tourism go. He knows everyone. And when I did my first book, he came to me. He's like, how come I don't know you? And I said, well, I don't know. So we met and we became good friends. And when I was doing the Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard books, he basically comped everything that I did over there. He got me rooms on either island and passes to get to certain places. Do you remember, Steve, when we went to Cape Pogue Lighthouse? And it was like they were waiting for us with the truck on Chappaquiddick. So it made me feel like a big deal. But the idea is we went... Where was I going with? Oh, to Great Point Lighthouse. And we just drove right out. It's 4 miles on the soft sand. So thankfully Steve's got a Jeep because my Toyota would have been just capsized in the sand. But that's going to be road trip for Nantucket. And then the big lead-off story is my love of the Friendly's restaurants, which are sadly like starting to go down. I don't know if anyone out there, I think they're mostly Northeast. Friendly's it's still around. There's like at least 100 of them still. On the Cape, there's like nothing. But that was always the big Sunday shopping day. Me and my Nina, and she would, take us kids out shopping. So it would be Friendly's for lunch, and then usually like a toy at either KB Toy Store or, Toys R Us was there, but we also had tons of toys or Child World there. Now I'm really dating myself for the 80s. So here's a fun fact. I don't want to give all of it away for next week, but Friendly's was started by 2 brothers. And God help me if I can remember their names. But the main thing is, it started in 1935. and both brothers lived to be over 100 years old. With the second brother, he died 2 months ago. He was 106. And I said, maybe it was something in the ice cream. They made ice cream and they lived to be over 100. I don't know. But yeah, Friendlies is one of those things that it's like it's going to be another one of those things that just follows in the footsteps of all my 80s passions that have just passed. Although Toys R Us might come back. So May is going to end up being a pretty big month. I'm really excited for a lot of stuff. I'm doing my normal, so the podcast that I do, it's normally 3 weeks on and 1 week off where I kind of recover because it's a lot of research, recording, editing. Fribbles. Yeah, the Fribbles at Friendlies were pretty good. They had the big, thick glasses that looked like they could kill you. Yeah, it is Fribbles. Don't worry, I researched it. And the Jubilee roll, which was like the Christmas ice cream thing. And I found old menus with like the fishamajig on it. The chicken lickin' plate was what I got off the kids' menu. Chicken tenders and fries. There you go. That's real kids food for you. But I do 3 weeks on, 1 week off to kind of give me a chance to reset because it's a lot of research, recording, editing. Next month, I'm going to actually be doing an extra podcast, a short one. And it's just dedicated to my grandfather. It's going to air on the 2-year anniversary of his passing. And I couldn't give him just a segment on a podcast because he was my hero and role model. So I'm like, no, he needs his own. But I also didn't want it to be, 50 to 55 minutes because the vast majority of you that watch this, listen to the podcast, etc., you don't know who he is. So if one of you had a podcast and it was like, here, this is about my grandfather, if it's an hour long, I'm going to eventually be like, all right, and kind of lose interest. So I'm thinking that way. I'd rather it be short, in and out, and you get the gist of who he was. But, so I've already got the logo for it. And so this is the logo. I had to go through and mess with the colors and such. But it's got the clover. It's a 4-leaf clover, I swear. My stupid photo is in the way. I swear, it's like right here. There's clovers right there. But that's going to be an extra podcast. And if you enjoy these live streams, you're going to get an extra one of those too. Ooh, I know, exciting. So May the 24th, my 6th book is going to be launched. And so, where in the heck is it? It's there. So, Iconic Hotels and Motels of Cape Cod. This is going to be launched on May 24th. Normally, I have like an awesome launch party where a bunch of people, we go somewhere. I hate calling it a lecture because it makes it sound like I'm smart. But I just talk about the book and take questions and sometimes have guest speakers and such. But with the way the world is, I can't do that. So what I'm going to do is on the night of May 24th, which is a Monday, I'm going to do a 7:30 live stream. And it'll be all about the book. Like I'm not going to, with these live streams, I'm like a ping pong ball because I don't have notes. So something will pop to the front of my brain and I'm like a dog with a squirrel where I'll see it and just, all right, I got to talk about that. But yeah, so I'm going to do an extra live stream as well. And I also have the chance to finally get back into training. I'm a personal trainer, but I haven't worked in a gym for like 3 years. I've been doing some in-home training, which is great, but COVID screwed it up. Courtney, I saw you in the chat. COVID screwed a lot of things up. And so I had to go and take a job cooking in a retirement home. And it was, if I had a censor button, I'd be like, effing sucked. It was a terrible, toxic environment. Not everyone, but just where I was. And so I finally had to get out of there. Last month I gave my notice, and I'm going to be taking a class on medical fitness specialist to add to my personal trainer certification. Lucky me, the class keeps getting pushed back. So instead of starting in March, it was April. Now I just got told it's May. So I just bought the textbook. I said, I'll read what we need to read, and then I'll catch up with you. And the textbook is 1,000 pages. I said, you've got to be kidding me. But luckily, I only have to read the first 300 pages. Ugh. But yeah, so once we get to May, I'm going to finally go back and work. Maybe not in a gym. I've got something lined up. I don't want to jinx it. Family and friends in the chat, you know. But I'm like, I don't want to jinx it. And then it doesn't happen. And then it's forever on this live stream where people can laugh. So I'll tell you a funny story. Because I do a lot of, I'll go to the top again. I'll recap what the podcast is. Because the main idea is I want to get more eyes and ears on the podcast. Because it's a passion project. And it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work. And I want people to see it, listen to it, enjoy it. But this is also interactive. So you came just... So my sister Kate just came in, and boy, I tell you, you came at the right time, because I'm about to tell a funny story that you heard. But so family will often say to me that my life is kind of like an episode of the show Seinfeld, where the most random stuff will happen, and it's like I can't make it up. It's just, it is what it is. So we'll jump into this. This was Monday. And I had to go to the laundromat to do laundry because the washer and dryer where I live, they're down. So that's fine. I like going to the laundromat. It's kind of a fun little slice of life. Threw my clothes in. That's great. And I took my phone and I did a walk to burn calories, because that's another thing. Burn the COVID weight off. So I walked down, did like 2 miles, came back, switched the clothes, threw them in the dryer, walked back again. 2 more miles. But I came back and I said, oh man, I've still got like over a half hour till my clothes are dry. So I sat in my car, turned it on, but not all the way on, so I could listen to the radio. And I'm listening to sports radio, and that's great. And I'm waiting and waiting. I said, I'll give it a few more minutes longer than I think it needed. And I went in, the clothes just got done, took them out, put them in the laundry basket, heaved them in the car, went to turn the key, brrr, battery won't start. I'm like, oh man, because I left it turned on, my battery's dead. So I'm sitting and waiting, figuring, all right, if I wait like 15 minutes, it'll get enough of a charge back that I can start it. Nope. Eventually, this woman that was waiting for I guess it's RTA. We used to call it the B bus in the 80s. That's what my Nana always called it. But she's waiting for that bus. And I get out, I pop the hood, and I'm kind of looking around like, oh man. She says, maybe you can get that guy to help you. And I knew this guy had been walking around. He had his mask under his chin with his cigarette sticking out. And he looked exactly like Paul Rudd. And except with a head that was probably empty. And he's sitting in his car facing me. And I said, oh, man, all right. I literally walked to his car, his window's up. I'm standing at his window. And he's just looking at me. I'm like, you're not going to even roll it down or anything? I mean, I don't look that dangerous. I'm not 6'10". So eventually he rolled it down. I said, can you think you could help give me a jump? All he had to do was pull his car forward. My battery was right there. So he's like, okay. He pulls forward, and I put my jumper cables on my battery. And all of a sudden he comes over to me, and he's like, I don't know how to get my hood open. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, oh, it might be that mine is like right under where the steering wheel is. You just pop it. So I'm looking at his car. Luckily there were people around, because all I kept thinking is I'm going to look in his car for where his hood latch is, and he's going to hit me with a wrench, and then I'm in his trunk, and that's it. So we're looking. He can't find it. I can't find it. And by this point, I'm like, forget it. And this young couple pulls up in their Jeep and they help me. And all the while they're hooking the jumper cables on and I'm thanking them. And the dude that looks like Paul Rudd, he goes back in his car and he's sitting and he's staring at me. And I'm looking at him like, thanks a lot. I thanked him afterwards, just thanks for trying anyway, because what if he's one of those guys like Billy Madison, when Steve Buscemi was the guy that had the list of people to kill? I said, if he's like that, I don't want to make an enemy. So yeah, that's my... Oh my God. I'll tell that story. So this was that like 3 or 4 years ago? My sister Ashley and I went to, it's Long Nook Beach in Truro. For those of you familiar with Cape Cod. This beach is in the middle of nowhere. Long Nook Beach became famous 2 years ago because the guy that died after getting bitten by the shark was there. So I don't know why that's where my mind went, but I said, oh no, everyone's going to know where my secret beach is, but really not. So I wanted to show her this beach. I don't have a photo of it. It's an awesome beach. There's high bluffs that lead you down to the beach. And we went there. I wanted to just show Ashley the dunes. And there's a guy at the bottom of the dunes. We're talking 70, 80 feet down, and he's wheeling his bike up. And it's like, what are you doing with your bike down there? And he wheels his bike up, and he parks it with the kickstand, and his back tire explodes. It just pops right there in front of us, and it's like, what the... So we put his bike into my car, and we took him to his house, and he had a wife, right? Schlee, he had a wife, didn't he? It's like his house was in the woods in Truro. And anyone that's been up in Truro in the off season, you could like lay in the middle of the road and not get hit for days. So he thanks us. We get to the house and he asks us, he said, do you want to come inside? And he said, I have something for you. And I'm like, oh my God, this is it. We're going to get killed right here. He gave us some random CD. He was like, here, I want you to have this CD. Did we keep it or did we just like frisbee it out the window on the highway? But it was like Seinfeld episode. Like, it's true. I couldn't believe it. It was literally like the middle of nowhere. And this guy and his wife, and she wanted to make us tea, but then he offered us this CD. Here, have this CD. And it's like, what? Yeah, and we went in the house, too. It wasn't even like a sense of danger. We were just like, let's go. I don't have that inner monologue, and our mother, she hates it with me. I'll go on photo trips and just go where the danger is and not think about it until after. For example, if any of you out there are familiar with Cape Cod history, the West Barnstable Brick Factory, it used to be, it's kind of near where Sandy Neck Beach is, but long story short, they made these bricks. They made millions and millions of these bricks. And they were like the biggest brick manufacturer east of the Mississippi. In 1934, they decided that they wanted to check the clay deposit and see how much clay they had left to kind of gauge how long they could keep the business up. They drilled a hole in the clay, hit water, and ruined the business, went under like that. It was over as soon as they hit water. So they abandoned the factory and everything, and part of the factory is still out there. It's just overgrown like crazy. And I'm going to try to find this photo of it while I explain. So basically, if you want to get to this factory, there's no path. There's no, like I was told, be prepared to have your clothes get ruined, which they did. And I walked out there, and you can't see this. It's like a part of a brick wall, essentially, is all there is left. And you can't see it until you're right up on it. So I'm just wandering through thorns and just brush and trees, and I'm almost there, I promise. It looks like I'm insane. I'm just swiping, swiping, swiping. Yay, there it is. Okay. So you can see there's no clearing. But the reason these pictures all look kind of a weird angle is because I couldn't get back far enough to get it all in because there's trees and brush. The way I found this was I started climbing trees around it and looking for it. 20, 30 feet up with no regard for whatever. And I was up in one of these trees, and I kid you not, I slipped, and I'm hanging on the branch, holding it, saying, this is it. This is where I'm going to die at the brick factory, and no one's going to find me because you can't get out there. I didn't die, but I actually got a brick from there. If you have a brick from the West Barnstable Brick Factory, like a whole one, I think they go for like $35 on eBay. A brick. Hold on. This is like show and tell. So this is the one that I got. It's as close to whole as I could find because it's got the WBB in it. That might be a little better. I probably couldn't get like $5 for this. I went to my mother's house after, and I told her the story about almost getting killed, and I showed her this brick, and Ashley's dog Buddha tried to immediately chew on it. I said, no, Buddha, I almost got killed trying to get this. I need to have it survive. So yeah, there's the brick, the proof that I have it. That's like 90 years old. So the podcast, to kind of circle back around, it goes up on Thursdays. It's everywhere you get it. So I usually promote it on Apple Podcasts because that seems to be the one that has the most downloads. So there's 16 episodes now. I actually just did my first Facebook/Instagram ad for it. I didn't spend that much money because I want to see if I get any sort of hits on it. But every episode is it's like 55 minutes or less. And I try to keep it where it's entertaining, interesting, New England travel and history, lifestyle topics that are fun and entertaining, such as like talking about why I quit drinking isn't that entertaining, I guess. But I didn't want it to be where it's seen as a history podcast, and if you don't like history, you don't tune in. So, and then, like this live stream, as soon as I'm done, I throw it right up on IGTV, and then I download it, and I put it up on YouTube with chapters. Because, obviously, like, we're at 36 minutes. So if you tuned into this after, not knowing what was coming, and you just tune in and here's me just running my mouth for 40 minutes, you're going to get bored. Well, I hope you don't, but... So I put chapters on the YouTube one. So, and it'll have titles, I don't know what any of these will be. It'll probably be like me saying hi to people. But yeah, I hope that if you've listened to any of the podcasts that you've enjoyed it. The main thing is getting eyes and ears on it. I can share it all I want, and I do quite a lot. But it means more when others do. Like my buddy Steve in there. I mean, you can't tell you how much I appreciate you sharing my work, because that means a lot. That means that you believe that what I'm doing is worthwhile. Because it's basically like, if I see someone's stuff that that looks good, I'll share it. But if I don't think it's good, it's like, well, someone else can. So I definitely appreciate that. And we will be doing Dedication to the Craft Part 2, more in-depth photography interview. and stories of, I'm going to have to get quotes from you, like, for each photo story, like the big trip to Maine, like that one. Be like, I need like a quote from you. Like, I'll just have you record it. Here's what Steve had to say. And you're like, it was a long trip. And it'll be just that. That would just be funny. I would find it funny. No one else would. But yeah. So tune in next week, episode 17. Friendlies. Ooh. Trip to Nantucket. My embarrassing sleepover stories. Which includes... So I'm trying to sum one up quick without giving too much of it away. The best one is me and one other kid were sleeping at a third kid's house. This one is familiar to my sisters in the chat. So the kid's house we were sleeping at, he slept up in his room, left us in the living room because I guess he didn't like us that much. My friend slept on the couch. I slept on the floor in a sleeping bag. The kid that we were staying at, his house, he had 2 dogs, giant, big fluffy one like an Akita, and a smaller little poodle. We're talking 2 a.m. I'm laying on the living room floor. The TV was on just to help us sleep, I guess. And his poodle walks into view. I'm on the floor, so the poodle's like eye level still. And he decides to pop a squat and just take a dump right on the floor next to my head as I'm laying there. And I'm just like 12 years old. I'm like, what do I do? I can't scream because then his parents will think that there's a murderer in the house. So I rolled over, pretended I didn't see it. Needless to say, I never slept at that kid's house again. Holy Lord. That's one of the sleepover stories. So I hope that you've enjoyed this live stream. I do these every week without a map, they're called, because basically that's how it is. It's a stream of consciousness. And I appreciate everyone that comes in to kind of check it out. And hopefully you go and check out the podcast. This, like I said, episode 16 is the one that's up now. And you can shoot me a message through here and just let me know what you think of it. Or if you ever have ideas for topics. I've got so much material that I've researched and ideas that I could do this podcast for 4 more years without doing any research. And I keep doing research. So it's a labor of love. I do enjoy it. But thank you so much for spending a little of your Friday night with my craziness as I just throw stuff at you. And yeah, don't have this kind of kombucha, multi-green. It is heinous. It's like liquid popcorn, which is not what I want. I love how I put it down and then I drink it. Whatever. So yeah, thanks for tuning in and listening to me ramble. And I'll be back next Friday again, 8 o'clock for another live stream. God only knows what it'll be. Usually, when I say it goes off the rails, I don't mean in a bad way. I come in with I'm going to talk about podcast stuff, and then it just goes sideways. But it's great. I love it. But thanks again. I will talk to you all again sooner than later, and I'm sure I'll have some new Instagram photos up at some point. It was rainy and snowy and crappy today, so nothing worth sharing. But yeah, enjoy the night, enjoy the weekend, and I'll talk to you again at some point sooner than later. See ya.